While more folks are joining us, we will go ahead and get going. So welcome everyone. We're so grateful to have all of you here tonight for this training session. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. If you were here last week, welcome back. And if you missed last week, don't worry. You can find the recording over at votesaveamerica.com. And some of our organizers will be sharing the link, the exact link to go to see all those resources. There's a very loud motorcycle outside. To find all those resources over on votesaveamerica.com. We are already up to 8,000 people. This is amazing. So while folks are joining, we're going to do a little tech housekeeping. So we want to welcome everyone on the phone. We want to welcome everyone on YouTube. We basically broke Zoom and my computer last week, so we'll see how it all goes tonight. And a few changes. So the chat box was absolutely insane last time, as those of you who were here know. So if you have a specific question that you want someone from our team to answer, you can go ahead and use the Q&A box. And Megan and Catherine from our Pennsylvania and Wisconsin teams are standing by to answer you. But don't worry, we will still use the chat box throughout the night to do some call and response and to shout out the states that you've adopted. So don't worry, chat box is still a thing. And so this week we want to start implementing your learning. So you can either pull up the worksheet that you received earlier in an email from Vote Save America, or pull out a pen and paper or open a doc or an email, but you're actually going to do some workshopping tonight. And also very important, so we want to make this as social as possible. So a few hashtags to use are training together, Vote Save America, and adopt a state. And that is a tweet that is maybe the greatest tweet of all time. That is baby Winnie. She's in Pennsylvania, and her mom and dad and dog sibling joined us for last week's training. So shout out to Winnie. And I think this, can't tell how old she is, but I think she may be the youngest political volunteer of all time. If your baby is younger and watching, please let us know. We want to review our community agreements. So this call is a supportive learning environment. We saw last week that we have a lot of first-time volunteers. So let's make sure that this is a really supportive space for those folks. Again, if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat box, and it's probably impossible for 2 people to respond to all 9,000 plus of you that are already here, but we will do our best. And then, of course, no trolling or cyberbullying. We're going to keep language suitable for all audiences, and we want to be respectful of everyone here. So even if there are folks on who have differing views or supported different candidates in the primary, please keep it positive. And also, really big thing, last week was wild and there was a tornado. I think there was a storm situation in Florida. So Zoom may break again. YouTube may break. Who knows what will break this week, but we're just all gonna roll with whatever happens. And you all were so gracious about everything last week. And so I just wanna continue supporting everyone on both sides of the screen tonight. And I want to also tell you a little bit more about who we are if it's your first week joining us. So Organizing Together 2020 is a community-based, volunteer-driven organizing campaign designed to get operational in 2020 earlier than ever. We currently have staff, over 600 staff in the 6 battleground states that you chose from when you adopted your state. And our team is made up of alumni from 13 different 2020 presidential campaigns. And then Vote Save America is your one-stop shop for all the information and tools you need to participate in 2020. And now I'm super excited to introduce you to our team for tonight. That's me, Ashley Williams, the National Training Director. Ashley Arnold, our National Training Associate, is joining us again. And this week, you'll also hear from our North Carolina Training Director, Lexi Coburn, and our Deputy National Campaign Director, David Barrios. And then there's one other person several other people who are joining us tonight that I know you're excited to hear about, but I want to introduce one of them now. You all know his voice, but Jon Favreau served as Barack Obama's head speechwriter from 2005 until 2013. He's the co-founder of Crooked Media. He's the co-host of Pod Save America. He's the host of The Wilderness. And although he grew up in Boston, he has adopted the fine state of Arizona. Welcome, Jon.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks for having me. Hey everyone, I'm so inspired and so proud of you all for doing this, especially everyone who's adopted Arizona. Rest of you are also fine. So in my old life, I was a speechwriter, so I spent a lot of time thinking about storytelling. And I'll just say this. There is one kind of presidential campaign that you see in the news every day. And that's a campaign about Trump and Biden and their speeches and their tweets and their gaffes and their ads. All of that stuff matters. But the real campaign, the campaign that actually decides who wins in November, is what you're training to be a part of right now. It is the countless conversations between organizers and voters that you're all going to have over the next couple of months. And most of the people you'll be talking to will be undecided. They'll either be undecided between Trump or Biden, or undecided between voting and not voting. Either way, they will probably not have the same political views as you. They will probably not see the world exactly as you do, or your friends, or your colleagues, or the people you follow on Twitter. And so your job will be to persuade someone else to see the world a little bit differently, to cast a vote that they might not have otherwise cast. And the most effective way to persuade someone isn't necessarily through a lot of facts or statistics or policies. It's through stories, especially your own stories, because when we share our own stories, that's how we recognize even a small part of ourselves in someone who might be very, very different. So we spoke to a lot of organizers for a podcast I hosted this year called The Wilderness. And there's this really inspiring woman named Angela Aldis, who started an Indivisible chapter in a really deep red part of Western Pennsylvania. She tells this story about the very first time she went canvassing. And the first door she knocks on, she gets this woman who says, "I don't want to talk to you. I voted for Trump and I don't want to be talked out of it." But instead of walking away, Angela keeps talking to her. And she says, "Look, I'm just out here today because I'm scared. I have MS. My medicine costs $8,000 a month. And I don't know what I'd do if I lost my health insurance." And so they end up talking for like 15 minutes. And it turns out the woman who voted for Trump is also terrified about the cost of drugs. And she thinks that way too many politicians care way more about the drug companies than they do about all of us. And Angela then tells her which candidates are actually going to do something about those drug companies. And by the end of that conversation, she actually had changed that Trump voter's mind, who didn't even want to talk to her at first. So there were 16,000 people at last week's training. If every one of those 16,000 could do what Angela did with just 5 people, 5 voters each, that's 80,000 votes. That is the 2016 margin in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That's the election. So I just want each of you to understand the power that you have to decide this race. Best piece of advice I ever received about persuading voters: always meet people where they are, but don't leave them there. So that is your challenge. And hopefully that's what you'll be learning tonight. And I am really excited to be part of it. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, John. And there are more sirens. I'm fairly close to the White House, so who knows what's happening there. So I'm going to kick it over now to our Deputy National Campaign Director and an alumni of the Cory Booker for President campaign to introduce our next special guest.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And hello, everyone. My name is David Barrios. I'm the Deputy National Campaign Director here at Organizing Together 2020. I have the unique pleasure of introducing Jay Ellis. Jay was born in South Carolina and spent his childhood traveling with his family as a son of an Air Force veteran. He's a member of AmeriCorps, where he provided care and resources to disadvantaged students in Oregon. And he served as a National Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day spokesman. He was asked by the Obama White House to lead a panel for My Brother's Keeper, which was President Obama's initiative to address persistent opportunity gaps faced by boys and young men of color to ensure that all young people can reach their full potential. He's starring in a sequel to the film Top Gun and is best known as Lawrence on the critically acclaimed show on HBO Insecure, which in my opinion is the best show on television right now. So I will kick it to Jay to quickly introduce himself. Jay.
What's going on, guys? Thank you for that, David. Thank you for Loving Insecure. What's going on, guys? I'm so happy to be here. I am so excited and proud and inspired by all of you guys, and just to even get the phone call, actually it was a text, even to get the text to be here is absolutely amazing. I have lived all over the country. My dad was in the Air Force. I lived in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Texas, Ohio, Oregon, and California. I am going to adopt Texas, although I've been told I should adopt North Carolina by someone in this group. I see you, Lexi. But I am going for Texas because that is where I spent my formative years. And I believe that we can really make a big difference there. So I'm super excited. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jay. We just have a few quick questions that we'd love for you to answer and gain your perspective on. So as you know, we're digging into the power of personal storytelling and how that motivates us to take action. Can you talk a little bit about what motivates you specifically to speak out on change and for specific issues?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I realized, it's interesting because it's something that Jon just said that reminded me once again, is like when you meet people where they are, when you can have a conversation with someone and you start to realize that there are places that we intersect in life through our own personal stories. And I think using those stories to connect with people, to hopefully get people to see the world differently or think about something differently, or even just have them walk away, having had a conversation that they've never had before, is such a big move forward. Fortunately, it's something I get to do in my day job, but it's also something that I try to bring everywhere I go in the world. And so I think that any chance, I get to use the platform that I've so fortunately been given to help reach people and to get people to vote in this case, it's something that, I have to do, and for me, the easiest way to do it is to have a conversation and to find how we're similar.
That's 100% right. And I think, it's one of the most powerful tools that we have as organizers here. Could you talk a little bit about your own personal journey to inspire others to get involved, and how you're leveraging your own story and making sure that gets out there and it's actually persuadable?
Yeah, I think getting others to get involved obviously isn't easy all the time, right? That's why we're all here, though, because we have taken it upon ourselves. You guys have taken it upon yourselves to be those voices. And to be the people that get out in the streets and have these conversations with people. And I think that, getting someone to change their mind shouldn't necessarily always be the goal. Getting them to walk away and think about the conversation that you had and helping them see something for the first time, I think is such a powerful thing. I think that is how we often get change. Because you can't force someone to think how you want them to think, but you can definitely, as the adage goes, you can take a horse to water, right? So you can get them there. And then I think the rest of it, at that point, you've done your job, and that the rest of it is hopefully gonna fall in place. And so I think for myself, that is something that I've found, again, like just being able to have a platform and be able to get to people's ears and have people kind of pay attention. And so I use my personal story of, again, living all over the place. I've been in school districts that have means. I've been in school districts that have absolutely nothing, or schools that have absolutely nothing in terms of resources. I've lived on every side of town there is to live on, just about. Minus in LA because it's super expensive. But I've had the chance to really get out and just experience who we are as people, and our humanity, I think, again, is the thing that connects us. And so I am always just driven to constantly find that and have those conversations.
I appreciate you sharing. Thank you. One last question here. Over 50% of the people who've actually committed to adopting our state are new to volunteering. Could you share a little bit about advice to these folks when it comes to sticking with the hard work of organizing?
Yeah. First of all, congratulations to all of you guys. Clap for yourselves, pat yourself on the back, give yourself a thumbs up, whatever it is. That is absolutely amazing. So kudos to you guys. Don't get discouraged. And when you do get discouraged, there are people to call. There's someone to text. There is someone, know that you are doing something that some days is harder than others. Some days it's easier than others. But I think one of the things that when I very first started volunteering and like constantly kind of felt like I was hitting a wall, both in the space that I was in as well as personally, I think one of the things that I really tried to take home, and I actually got this from someone who I worked under, was every day is a day to start over. Every day is a clean slate. And what you did yesterday does not mean and is not indicative of what you're going to do today and the next day and the next day and the next day. So you always have an opportunity to get better in telling your story. You always have an opportunity to find new ways to connect. You always have an opportunity to feel more comfortable in your shoes as you're having these conversations with people that sometimes are very difficult. And know that like, just because today wasn't great does not mean that tomorrow's not going to be better. And by the time you get out of it, you're going to be a pro.
Appreciate that. Jay, thank you so much. Team Lawrence for life. With that, I'm going to also have the unique pleasure of introducing a few of our organizers from our adopted states. As someone who started out his career in organizing, both as an AmeriCorps volunteer and then eventually as an organizer for President Obama's re-election campaign, I have the unique pleasure of introducing organizers and folks who are just doing the work. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Jackson from Arizona. Go for it.
Hi, everyone. If you've adopted Arizona, type Arizona all the way in the chat box. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the field organizer for Mojave County, Arizona. I'm organizing because climate change is real and we need true leadership to address this crisis. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the field organizer in Manatee County, Florida, on the west coast of Florida. And I am organizing because I believe everyone should have equal access to education, especially within the state of Florida. So shout out to everyone who adopted Florida.
Hello everyone, my name is Mishi Dayel. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm currently organizing in Miami, Florida. So everyone who adopted Florida, woohoo. I'm organizing because I am a Haitian immigrant. And if you've ever been to Miami, you know we're a community of immigrants. And I want to make sure that we all have a seat at the table and we're championing the issues that are important to us. So thank you for adopting Florida.
Hi, my name's Megan. My pronouns are she and they. And I'm an organizer in Oakland County, Michigan. So if you adopted Michigan, go ahead and drop Michigan Hustles Harder in the chat because we do. I began organizing in Michigan because in 2016, we lost to Trump by just 10,704 votes, which is a really small margin. There's 10,000 people on this Zoom call right now. And thank you so much for doing this work. It's super important. And with the hard work that you're doing, we're going to win Michigan back. So thank you very much.
Howdy, my name is Reagan Hunter, pronouns he, his, and I'm an organizer in Southwest Michigan. I'm in this fight because an administration that has done extraordinary harm to so many people requires us all to step up and fight back in extraordinary ways. And I'm a little biased here, but I think Michigan's the place to do that. So if you're a fan of Gretchen Whitmer and if you're a fan of making sure that we turn things around in this country, you should join Michigan.
Hey everyone, my name is Anja. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an organizer in Eastern North Carolina, and I organize because I am passionate about K-12 education policy. And as a Black queer woman, I think it is absolutely crucial to elevate diverse voices. So shout out to everyone who adopted North Carolina. Let's go.
Hey everyone, my name is Charles. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm organizing in Charlotte, North Carolina. So if you adopted NC, please throw a hey y'all in the chat. And the reason I do this work is because I deeply believe that government can be a force for good in this country if everyday Americans step up to make their voices heard. And this type of work is exactly how you elevate other people's voices to make a difference. So I really appreciate y'all joining us, and let's go win this thing.
Hi everyone, my name is Darcy. My pronouns are she, her. I am organizing in Central PA, so shout out to everybody who adopted Pennsylvania. As a college freshman in 2016, I was shocked that only a third of my residence hall voted. I became an organizer to inspire young people to learn about the issues and become politically engaged.
Hi everyone, my name is Kaylin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm also organizing in Central PA, so if you adopted Pennsylvania, drop a PA-mazing in the chat box below. And I'm organizing because there's just far too much at stake in this election for me to sit on the sidelines.
Sorry, wouldn't unmute. Hi, my name's Kennedy. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm an organizer in the suburbs around Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm organizing to persuade some of those conservative voters, empower all the progressive voters, build some community along the way. Elect a new president, 23,000 votes. We can do it, y'all. Throw a WI in the chat if you adopted Wisconsin.
Amazing. Thank you so much, organizers. So as we go ahead and try and screen share again, who knows what will happen with technology. The organizers who you just introduced will be chatting away in the chat box, so give them some love. And organizers, feel free to drop some links to your upcoming events in there. So we want to review a little bit of what we covered last week, and then we'll dive into the training. So last week we covered the phases of a campaign to sort of situate ourselves and where we are in the 2020 calendar. So right now we're in the capacity building phase where we recruit and build teams. Then we'll move into voter contact. Then as soon as early vote begins in a state, we start with get out the vote, or GOTV operations. We shared the volunteer team model, which helps to create teams that have a sustainable structure. And then we dug into something called relational organizing, which is really just a term for talking to people that you know. And we gave you a little Venn diagram cheat sheet for how to decide who to talk to. So you're going to talk to folks who are in a high priority state, like your adopted state. You're going to talk to people who care about the issues. And right now, while we're building capacity, you are going to talk to people who may want to get involved to volunteer, but don't know how. And as we get further into the cycle, you'll be talking to friends who are maybe not great voters. And then we talked about a volunteer superpower that you will use whether you're talking to people you know or you don't know, and that is the hard ask. And remember, it's not a hard ask because it's difficult, it's hard because it's clear and specific. And as we mentioned last week, we had over 50% of you were new to organizing, which is absolutely insane. We're so grateful that you're here. I want to take a second, and if you can share in the chat box what actions you've taken in the last week, big or small. And the chat box goes by so fast. So Ashley Arnold, could you call out a couple things that you're seeing?
Yeah, it looks like some people are phone banking, they're sending text messages, they're talking to their friends and family. So all great things.
Amazing. So keep it coming. So this group is already making such a huge difference. And so I know many of you, may think you don't know how to tell your personal story yet. I saw some of that in the chat box, but when you were recruiting folks or inviting them to join tonight or having those initial conversations and making your heart ask, I'm guessing you probably worked a little bit of your personal story into them without even realizing. So tonight we're going to go even deeper into a specific framework that will help you with your storytelling. So now is the time, grab your pen and paper, open a Google Doc, open the worksheet we sent earlier, and get ready because you're going to actually do some homework. And I'm so excited to pass it over to an alumni of the Elizabeth Warren campaign, our National Training Associate, Ashley Arnold.
Awesome. Thank you, other Ashley. That was super inspiring. Let me just start with that. So I want to begin, and we're going to jump right into the chat box. And I want people to start by naming a public figure whose story has inspired them. And I'll give you folks about 10 seconds before I start calling some things out. Awesome. So I'm seeing AOC, Brian Stevenson, Obama, Michelle, of course, obviously. Awesome. So those are all great. And I want to start by really grounding us in those people and their stories. You felt connected to them because of their values, and those values are going to likely show up in the story that we'll begin to craft tonight. And for me, I saw someone say AOC. I also love her. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she feels really close to me. She's a young woman. She's a person of color. She's somebody who didn't really see themselves getting into politics. She was a bartender. I was a waitress for a long time. So she's someone that feels really close to me. And though she obviously has a lot of policies that I support, and she has a progressive bent, the aspects of her story, her being young, her being of color, those are the things that make me feel close to her. So we're going to start to talk about our own stories tonight and begin to craft a lot of that ourselves. Awesome. So our stories highlight who we are, what we believe, what has shaped us in those beliefs, and they have a huge impact on building community and relationships, and also galvanizing others to take action. On top of pushing people towards action, storytelling achieves so many other things too. It allows others to get to know us. This is exactly connected to that tidbit I just shared about AOC. She is in Congress, she supports the Green New Deal, but it's the fact that she's a bartender, she's from the Bronx. When she introduces those things about herself, we feel closer to her. It's not super relatable to be, for someone to say, oh, I'm in Congress. A lot of us are not in Congress. And as we touched on a little bit, stories explain our values as well. So a good story specifically for our volunteer will explain why you're calling somebody, probably at 8 on a Thursday, why you're sending them a text, or why you're knocking on their door when we are allowed to do that again. And related to that first bullet, it provides an opportunity for connection. So it humanizes people and it creates community, just like Jon was talking about. We don't have to agree on everything, but if I'm able to chat with somebody and they tell me, oh, they also are concerned about student debt, that's something that I could say, oh, wow, me too. I think we can do this together. Maybe we can fund bank together because we're super passionate about this issue. And lastly, the two, last bullets go hand in hand. Stories create a strong sense of urgency, and that's why they're effective. They connect emotions to action, and they push people to volunteer, to vote, or to get involved in their community in new ways. So for the purposes of tonight, as we begin to craft our story, which will be invaluable tools for you all as you go into volunteering in your home states and your adopted states, we're going to follow Aaron. So Aaron is going to be our imaginary first-time volunteer. We're going to use his example throughout to begin to think about how we can take tidbits from our own lives and craft a really strong story. I know many of you can read this, but I want to just go ahead and read it out loud for people who are on the phone, people who are multitasking. I know some of you are probably making dinner or putting kids to bed, so I will go ahead and read this. So Aaron was born into a middle-class family in Nashville. His mom was a teacher and his dad a truck driver. He saw and admired his mom's profession and wanted to do the same thing. Aaron is now a public school teacher in Portland, but he's also a single parent and he's struggling. His salary as a teacher barely covers his rent and expenses, and he often finds himself buying supplies to help keep his students afloat. So this is a sad but altogether not uncommon story. So there are so many frameworks to help people begin to craft their own stories, and we're going to zero in on this one tonight. So the first is the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now. And if we dig in deep to the story of self, it begins the story by communicating your specific values and your motivations for getting involved. Essentially, it says, I care about X, so I'm going to do Y. The story of us communicates our values, our shared values. If you're in a volunteer group, it really starts to build community for those who are phone banking, for those who are sending text. And it not only builds community among volunteers, but it also serves as an invitation for those people who haven't yet volunteered. It says, hey, if you care about education too, you should join us. You should come volunteer with us. And lastly, the story of now moves people to action by communicating what needs to be done, why, and when. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but that also is a great place to add a hard ask. So utilizing these three components of a story are going to make your story even more effective and even more impactful, because the story of self is personal, the story of us is communal, and the story of now is urgent. So That first personal bit is going to share personal details about your life that demonstrate your values. So it's going to maybe tell folks your job, your hometown, how you were, how you were reared, or a piece of your identity. And the story of us is communal because it draws a clear connection between those personal details and the values that are important in your community specifically. And lastly, the story of now, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to call out specific facts, figures, current events that connect to your story and to really get people fired up to get involved and to take action. And I know a lot of that might seem a little nebulous because we haven't really put it to Erin's story yet, but that's what we're going to do. And hopefully this will help demonstrate how you can own pieces of your life and really craft an effective story. So remember Aaron, he is middle class, he's a teacher, he's a single dad. His story is going to highlight those things right off the bat, and those are really strong. He might start speaking to somebody and say, I'm a father, I'm a teacher, I'm struggling to support myself, my students, and my child. His story of us is also pretty simple. Aaron knows that other people have children, they have grandchildren, and he's going to point to that. He might say something like, I know other people have young people in their lives that they care about and they want to see succeed. And lastly, for the purposes of this example, Aaron is going to be volunteering on a city council race. So the great Harry Styles is going to be running for city council in Portland, and he is running on a pro-education, pro-rising teacher funding, pretty staunch pro-education platform. And this is a great time to make an ask of others to get involved in Harry's campaign because Aaron is very strongly supporting Harry because of those things. So now that we've run through an example, we're familiar with the components of a story, and we're going to begin to craft our own stories. And before we even dive in there, I want to just pull out 5 pieces of really important things as you begin to craft your story. So the first is to start with your values. The first one, you might have noticed that I brought up values in the story of self and in the story of us, and that's just because they're so incredibly important. Values connect us to others, and they talk about why we care about things and why we've been motivated to take action. The second, it requires vulnerability. So it could be really hard for Aaron to call a voter and say, yeah, it's hard for me to pay my bills. It's hard for me to buy my child something new that I want to give them. That's a really hard thing to say, but it makes Aaron somebody that people can connect to. And it's also really a sign of strength. It also connects to community. So we don't exist in isolation. If you all believed that, you would not be on this call tonight. So we want to make sure that our stories are connecting communities and inviting them to also realize their stake in this fight. And it also meets the moment. So while a fight for racial equity or climate change reform or education access is going to be lifelong, and it should be lifelong because there's always work to be done, we want to zero in on specifics of the moment. And lastly, and related to that, it's going to call people to action. So this is where you have that hard ask. It's going to make it compelling and specific ask of people to get involved. So like we referenced before, there's a worksheet that you all should have gotten in an email, but also just jotting these things down in a notebook or in a Word doc is totally fine because we are going to get very introspective tonight, and we're going to begin to do some brainstorming. So let's start with what motivates us to take action. Take a minute, and I'm really going to pause for like 30 seconds, so it's going to be uncomfortable silence, but it's because we're channeling our inner classroom vibes tonight. Take a minute to reflect on your core values. Think about those values that serve you, and like Jay said, the things that you reach into yourself for strength when you feel like you can't go on. Those are those values. And I'm going to start with silence, and then I'll call some things out. And if you get stuck, please look to the chat box. I'm sure that other people are having some of the feelings that you're having. Oh, I see so many good ones. It's hard to be quiet. I see equity, justice, empathy, science, compassion. These are all such good ones, and they undergird so many stories. Give us a few more minutes or seconds. Creativity, healthcare for all, yes, integrity. These are so good. Perfect. So, and a lot of those things really connect to your story itself. They're going to undergird your story and be that bedrock that gets you started. And next, we're going to reflect on the values that matter most to your community, in the community that you're working specifically. So this will help you craft a story that feels close to people, the way I talked about AOC feeling close to me. And I want to just have a quick caveat here too, because community is not always geographic. You know, it's not my community in Lansing or my community in San Francisco. It can be a community of, you know, queer folks. It can be a community of first-time teachers. Those are also communities that we want to really start to think about. Awesome. People are dropping so many great things in the chat. It's going very, very quickly. So I see Medicare for all, police reform, fair wages, economic justice, gun control, arts education. Oh, such a good one. These are all so great. Awesome. So we are gonna finally think about moments that really create urgency. So when you start to think about how you want to craft your story of now and how you want to pull that, you know, call to action, that hard ask at the end, think about what's happening right now. You know, is there a piece of legislation moving through the House? Is there a school board seat up? Is there an important election? Is Harry Styles running? Because if Harry Styles is running, I will go quit and work on his campaign right now. So think about those things. Think about really connecting what's happening right now and making that strong call to action. And maybe some people, if you're feeling advanced, you can put a potential hard ask in the chat. It's going very quickly. Awesome. I see a lot of things about current unrest around race, the police, COVID, voting rights. These are all such great things. And they tell me that you are really starting to dig in and craft your own stories. So these questions should give you concrete answers to what to highlight in your own story. And they should also provide you a potential call to action. But this is just the beginning. I've been working in organizing for years and my story constantly changes and yours will too. So it's kind of a lifelong journey. And remember, just like Jon said in the beginning of this call, when you get on the phone with someone or you knock a door, it's going to feel weird to a lot of people just to start talking about yourself. But remember that your voice specifically matters. And it's not a nice to have, it is a have to have. And really lean into yourself and sharing your story because it's going to make all the difference. So now that we've begun to craft our own stories, I'm going to pass it over to our amazing training director in North Carolina, Lexi, who is also a Warren alum. And she's going to get us started about the context of which to share a story as a volunteer.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Lexi Coburn. I'm the North Carolina Training Director for Organizing Together. If you adopted North Carolina as a state, raise up and represent, we are here to take the blue back. And as Ashley said, this is only the beginning of your storytelling journey. And as you continue to develop your story, it's super important to consider how and when you go about sharing it. Just how specific are you in telling it and in what context you're telling it in. Ask yourself details like, can I add another detail here? Or who will be a part of my audience when sharing my story? These questions will only serve you to make your story even stronger. So each of you have either committed to adopting a state or volunteering in your own state. Either way, fantastic work. You might be wondering how you integrate your story into the volunteer experience. And as a volunteer, when do you share your story and with whom? So let's go through a couple of examples of when you would share your story. In a one-on-one, which is a conversation with a potential volunteer, you'll be sharing your story there to build connection and establish a relationship. Also, at a community meeting, when you're presenting at local community meetings, think about what groups you already belong to that you can get your foot in the door. Also on the phone with voters. A lot of you said phone banking in the chat. This is exactly where this is going to happen. You'll share a short version of your story when talking to voters to connect with them. Also, before or after a canvas shift, often when you've signed up to knock doors, There will be an opportunity to share stories, to inspire each other before hitting the doors, to get that old Obama fired up, ready to go essence about volunteering. Also, you'll do it when kicking off an event of any kind. Often volunteer events will highlight personal stories to build connection and motivate people to stay involved. And lastly, at the door with a voter, I personally love canvassing. And when you talk to voters, people may not remember the specifics, but they will remember how your story made them feel. There are so many helpful things that you can do as a volunteer. And as you probably noticed from the previous slide, a lot of activities are fairly different from one another. Something like a one-on-one includes just two people, and its goal is to help those two folks get to know each other. While a volunteer team meeting can have anywhere from 5 to 50 people, this also aims to introduce a candidate or initiative to a community. I said all that to say that these different events require different stories. And we recommend first developing your story and then really parsing it out to a 3-minute or 1 minute or a 30-second version of your story to accommodate all of the volunteer activities that you might be participating in this year. So tonight we're going to dig deeper on 3 volunteer activities that you might be participating in. We will see how one might tell their story differently for each and then practice tailoring our stories. First, we will talk through how to tell your story at a community meeting. And this is just to give more color on this example. A great place to find like-minded people who think like you are places like your Indivisible chapter, shout out to Indivisible, or your neighborhood association meeting, or just your book club meeting. Find out where commonality lies and go find it. And a lot of these groups have continued to meet virtually in the time of COVID-19. Secondly, we will highlight what is special about telling our story on a call with a potential voter or volunteer. And lastly, we're going to run through a great example of sharing on social media. I think that we all are super used to sharing on social media, but let's talk about what it means to actually have an ask on social media. Okay. So a great place to find like-minded people who also like to volunteer is a community meeting, as I said before. So let's go through this. You'll see that we're still using the Aaron example. It's a wonderful example introduced to us. We're going through an introduction. We have a, hey, I'm Aaron. Thanks for giving me the time to share more about myself and Harry Styles. I am a public school teacher in Southeast Portland, and I see every day just how much our students need, and that is not given to them. I constantly see money diverted from our schools and teachers' salaries into other areas of government. I'm phone banking for Harry Styles, who is running for city council on a staunch pro-education platform, because I know that he cares about our kids and will fund their education. I'm counting on all of you to join me in phone banking this Thursday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. This is a wonderful ask. This is a wonderful story. This is a wonderful introduction. And you can see here that it incorporates all of the great things we need to make our story great. Also, while you're on the phone with the volunteer after having made an ask, you might run into some interference. You might run into some difficulty. A voter would say something like, well, I'm not sure. I do not agree with the plans from our current city councilman, but kind of a shy person. That this is so normal. This is very, very, very normal. A lot of you in the chat may have also at one point in time felt exactly like this. It's okay. Talk to them. Say something along the lines of, no worries. I understand where you're coming from. I'm also not a huge extrovert, but I know I have to do something. I am a teacher, and I see every day resources being taken away from our students. I often have to end up buying them supplies myself. Having Harry Styles on city council will make the lives of my students tangibly better. I know that for sure. The voter, struck like I am, says, wow, that's awful. Well, maybe I can join it. Just try it out. You never know what kind of story hits what kind of person. You might as well just go ahead and put it all out there. And also on social media, we love to scroll on Twitter. We love to post on Facebook. Let's make something out of these things. How am I spending my Friday night? I'm phone begging for Harry for council. Our students are too important to only get 11% of this city's budget. Harry Styles, like me, wants to change that. If you agree, sign up to make phone calls at this link. Now, I've been organizing for many, many years, and this is a fantastic tweet. And I would absolutely retweet this myself. So as you're thinking about these things, we also want to hear from you. Where will you share your personal story this week? So I'll give you all a few moments in the chat box to share where you're going to share your personal story this week. Oh, wonderful. You guys are just amazing. Look at all these responses. I can't keep up with it. Ashley, do you mind reading a few comments that you're seeing?
It looks like people are saying on Instagram, my favorite platform, with their friends, their colleagues, on Twitter. Great, great answers.
Amazing. Instagram is becoming my favorite one too. Well, you know, I think that you all got it. I think you all understand exactly what we're talking about, the real power of the personal story. So with that, I thank you all, and I'm going to hand it back over to Ashley Williams.
Thank you, Lexi and Ashley. Lexi clearly has no personality whatsoever. Jay, if you're looking for a new leading lady, I mean, I think we found her. That was so great. Thank you. So going into the next week, next steps are to practice sharing your story of self. A lot of you were saying you're going to post on social. That is awesome, but we would suggest maybe starting with someone you know, really finding those beats and hitting, you know, all the elements of the structure that we talked about, and then putting out in the world to a bigger audience. And then next week, we are going to be talking about voter registration and or vote by mail, depending on which state you've adopted. So some of you are asking if this call was just folks from a particular state. So these first two calls have been all the states all together, but next week we will split you all up. So you'll be with our training teams in your specific state who will go through the different laws and deadlines and all the things that are so different and so unique for each of our 6 states. So there's no way we could do it together. So look out for that next week, and we will have more exciting special guests. And so I want to pause there and thank you all for being so present for the training portion. And I want to kind of put that aside, and we'll do some questions with Jon at the end. But first, I want to introduce you to a really important member of our team at Organizing Together 2020. I know, you know, we've been hearing so many headlines over the last few years about the way Indigenous communities are having their votes suppressed. We've heard about the impact of COVID-19 in the Navajo Nation. And so we knew we wanted to have someone who can give voice to what is going on in those communities on the call tonight. So Eric Deschini is our Northern Nations Regional Organizing Director. He's held appointments with the Arizona Governor's Office and Navajo Nation Office of the President and Vice President. And prior to working with us in Arizona, he served as the National Tribal Advisor to the Bernie 2020 campaign. He also served as a member of the Arizona House of Representatives, where he represented Indigenous people from 9 of the 22 federally recognized tribes in Arizona. We will go ahead and stop screen sharing. Eric, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Whoops, and we'll just make sure you get off mute. There you go. Hi.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Ashley. I really appreciate the introduction, and then of course all of you taking the time to listen. It's a real honor. As some of you might know, I had some prepared comments to make, but you know, the presentation that we have here has really inspired me, and also some of our speakers have inspired me to kind of veer off a little bit and have a small departure. You know, storytelling is so powerful, particularly from where I come from. My people as Navajo Nation people, but we have Indigenous peoples all over the world who are expert storytellers. And in fact, at least for my people, in the winter time is when we are allowed to speak about those stories. And so I just wanted to quickly, there's a variety of reasons for that. There's a whole body of knowledge that determines that. But one of the things that I wanted to get into is I know one of the, why did I get into organizing? And again, everything we heard up until now is so got me into thinking about my purpose, my values, and that is specific to my sons. I have 3 sons. They're all middle school age. And a big purpose of why I do the things that I do is to be a quality father. And it just reminded me of a time when my middle boy was about 5 years old, and we raised a lot of them in the urban setting. So you had hard floors, you had running water, and you had electricity. And we decided to move home onto the Navajo Nation. And we decided to move into a hogan. Now, a hogan in our language is pronounced hoan, and it has dirt floors. It has no running water. It has no electricity. And I remember when we moved in, my son said, "Dad, I thought you were going to find us a beautiful place to live." And my response was, "Well, son, this is a beautiful place to live. It's our traditional dwelling." And he said, "No, it's not. There's dirt on the floor." And I'll never forget that, because from his perspective, there was clearly a transition from urban settings to traditional ones. And Ashley pointed to some of the challenges that we have with COVID-19. Well, a lot of our people back home live in these conditions. A lot of it by choice, because this is how we traditionally live. And really, why is it important to organize? Why? Well, because of the leadership that we put into office, obviously. What comes out of the White House, what comes out of the federal government, what comes out locally here in Arizona. Right now, looks like we're entering into the next spike of this COVID wave, unfortunately. Really scary times. And of course, my people back home have been hit particularly hard in this regard. But imagine trying to fight off things like COVID-19 when you can't wash your hands. Like, those were the housing conditions that we lived in before. And those are the housing conditions that a lot of our families still live in now. So why do I organize? It's because in really many respects, like, our lives depend on it. And for someone like my son and my beloved relatives, it means the world, in many cases, literally.
Eric, thank you so much. Every time you speak, I just want to cry. It's like so powerful. So we just have a short amount of time left, and I know you have another call right after this. So we're so grateful to you squeezing us in. You're in high demand. So last week we talked about hard asks, which are clear and specific. You have about 15,000 people listening to you right now, and many more will watch on YouTube. And I remember you told me you needed to speak for the grandmothers and the grandfathers, which I thought was so beautiful. So do you have an ask for all 15,000 people who are watching right now?
Yes, absolutely. Like the story I had just mentioned, there's a different set of expectations that our elderly live by. Many of our elderly relatives live and maintain a traditional religious practice that reconciles with the ways our ancestors lived many, many centuries ago. And that knowledge system is complex and provides really for a cosmological accountability, in addition to contemporary things. And those mandates are rooted in distinct philosophical government or governance systems that are really genuinely unique. And each tribe, village, pueblo, they're different, but the underlying essential common denominator is that we have to maintain a certain kind of balance. And that kind of balance, when it goes out of balance, becomes all of our issues, particularly with global pandemics like the climate crisis. And so, as we begin to address some of these things, my hard ask is how do we bring, where it's really a question and then an ask, how do we bring these unspoken, untold perspectives, stories, values to the forefront. And that's usually the real big challenge that we have. I would say, do what you can to ensure the first peoples of this continent are not the last peoples considered. Unfortunately, we are usually the last consulted and the first adversely affected. COVID-19 is one of those examples. The election is a math contest, right? Well, time and time again, our Indigenous peoples, because of our population numbers pale compared to others, we are oftentimes an afterthought or not a thought at all. And we all want a certain kind of justice in this country, and I really have to assert that if we are going to actually achieve that, we actually have to reach far back into redoing a lot of the ways that we think about organizing, how we think about civic engagement, and then of course, how we think about civics in general, how our government functions. And so it's really a fundamental matter. Ask your organizational leadership, where are our Indigenous peoples at? Are they sitting at the table? Why aren't they involved? When our organization began, were they first consulted and included? These are some basic questions that you can push up at the dinner table, amongst your supervisors, and wherever else you go. Are Indigenous peoples last? Even in a list of policy issues, are they at the bottom? And should they not be at the front? We are the first peoples. So that's the ask, is to be our advocate and to get out there and ask those tough questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Eric. So you heard it here, everyone. Make sure that those first peoples are at the table, that they are included, that they are not an afterthought. So that was amazing. Thank you so much. And I know you're having a meeting with other folks from the Navajo Nation, so send them our good wishes, and that there are all these people cheering them on and wanting to do whatever we can to support the issues that they're facing right now.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And then, so I now am super, super excited to ask some of your questions, some of your many, many questions to Jon. And so when we were planning out sort of the arc of this training series, I was like, I really hope Jon can be on the storytelling one, because that's kind of his thing. So no pressure on the training team, but having, one of the most probably well-known speechwriters of all time. Anything we left out, Jon, on like personal storytelling that you're like, oh, that's important, they didn't say it?
No, you guys nailed everything. I was texting the team during this that this is like an unbelievably impressive training. I think when I learned speech writing, I probably could have benefited from more structure to the stories like you guys did, connecting the story of self, the story of us to what's going on now. I just think I think it was really well done.
Well, thanks. Wasn't looking for a compliment, but we'll take it. So one of the questions someone asked, how much does having the right audience impact the success of your story delivery? I thought that was a good question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think crafting a good story, or like a good speech, it is all dependent on who the audience is. That's what you're trying to think about from the very beginning. And so, when I was writing with Obama, he would give a very different speech if it was in front of a rally of 30,000 people versus the Rose Garden with a bunch of media versus a small round table of undecided voters. So I do think when you're telling a story, when you're thinking about story, the audience is actually everything you're supposed to have in mind. How can I reach them? How can I connect to them? How can I, like I was saying at the beginning, you want to meet them where they are. You want to find that connection. You want to understand where they're coming from. You want to have empathy about their lives, their stories, their beliefs. And then once you recognize that, then you can sort of move them in the direction that you want. But it does require a healthy dose of empathy for your audience to start.
I love that, starting with empathy. Another question people had, how can we motivate people who feel hopeless about change?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's funny. I talked to Stacey Abrams today on the pod, and I sort of asked her this question because I think one of the big struggles and challenges we'll have is it's not just about finding people who voted for Trump and having them come over. There's even more people in this country who don't vote, not because they don't believe that it will actually do anything that actually change. And I think what you have to tell people is you have to be able to give people sort of concrete examples of changes that can happen and you can actually start in like a local level, right? Like we always think that everything is important with national politics and who the president is, and that's incredibly important. But so many of the organizers that I talked to for the Wilderness told me that to get a lot of people to vote for the first time, they talked about local issues. So I talked to some organizers in the Miami area, and there was a garbage dump in their neighborhood. And a bunch of people who never voted before, never got involved in politics before, by talking to them about how they could vote for a new city council to get rid of that garbage dump, suddenly they were involved in, all right, now I can be involved in Congress. Now I can be involved in a statewide race. Now I can be involved in the presidential race. And so I think you need to give people a sense that voting will lead to tangible results, that there will be actual progress that they can measure in their own lives. And then when you do that, then you start building that faith in our institutions again, in voting, in government.
Awesome, great answer. And I love the casual. I was chatting with Stacey Abrams today. So we're very jealous. And if she would like to join a future call, let us know. One thing I saw a lot in the chat box when we were talking about the places to use storytelling, one of them being on the phone. Hopefully one day we'll be able to talk to people at the door again. And a lot of people being shy or not feeling comfortable doing that. What advice do you have for people who are just like, I will absolutely not ever call someone. I don't want to knock on someone's door.
I was like that when I first started, when the first time I volunteered, the first time I knocked on doors. I am not someone who just wants to go up to strangers and start talking. I think what you have to realize is like, it's going to be uncomfortable and you're going to have a bunch of people either hang up on you or tell you that they don't, want to hear from you again. Like, that's fine. And I think you should just realize that every single person who goes through this, even the most extroverted people who go through this, have these uncomfortable and awkward moments, and it's okay to fail. You're gonna have you can knock on 100 doors, right? You get 2 people to listen and to decide that they're gonna register to vote, or they're gonna, they're gonna get their families involved or whatever. Like, that's huge, right? Like, this is not, I think you need to go into it understanding that this is not something where you're expected to have a super high success rate and nail every single call and nail every single door, right? Like, you're going to have a lot of awkward encounters, weird encounters, but that's okay, right? What the whole purpose of this is to try, and in all your awkwardness and all your shyness, you just got to go give it your best.
I love that. Shout out to Team Introvert out there. Last question, perhaps the most important question. A lot of people want to know about your t-shirt and where they could also get cool merch. Is that available for everyone, or is that like a super insider thing?
No, absolutely. You can go to crooked.com and the merch store there. We have all of these. We have all of the states, the swing states, in the store. So buy a bunch of Arizona ones because I want everyone to adopt Arizona. But the other swing states are there too.
The other states are okay. Awesome. Well, Jon, thank you so much. And I will just, on a personal note, say that some of my dearest friends who are watching tonight, the Blue Stronghold, they know who they are. We have sort of followed your career since you became a known person way back in the day in 2008. So this is a really wild full circle moment. And one of those people is in the hospital right now. And so I know she's watching, and it's just so weird to be talking to you. So thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for letting us be a part of this project. And everyone, all 15,000 people who are watching live tonight who participated, thank you all so much. We're so grateful. And we will see you next week to talk about voter reg and vote by mail. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, thank you.